See black beauty, black beauty, yeah, yeah. The African is wholesome. The African is so beautiful, yeah. The African love. Welcome to Mothership 9, you guys.
Hold on.
The ship, because we're in the Mothership 9, there's no time zones and everything. So, Asher, he's in Cairo. Adam's here in Chicago. I'm in here in Chicago, but we're all on the ship right now. Last
Right.
time. So, Mothership 9, I brought these two amazing musicians, composers, goodness, scholars, Adam Zanolini and Asher Gamedze. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Good to be with you, friends.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Last year we did Mothership 9 live at Elastic Arts, and Asher was here in Chicago. We were just talking about how cold it was. And the reason why I brought these two together is because not only are they amazing musicians, but they do a lot of research about this great Black music that we play. And they both have like two different perspectives, I think, of their research, because, Adam's research was all from like the Chicago cosmic Black music, and Asher's was from the South African cosmic Black music. So each of you, if you just tell me a little bit more about what you've done scholastically, academically, with this sound that we do.
You want to go ahead, Adam?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's been a little while since I was really deep into the scholastic and academic areas of things. But, about a few years ago, I wrote my doctoral dissertation about Afrocentric spiritual jazz in Chicago. I did an awful lot of sort of research about kind of the spiritual dimension in the music. That's kind of coming from, I got introduced to this kind of music in Chicago, and then I went off to New York City and kind of followed this kind of wave of people that moved from Chicago to do the music in New York, and the AACM established a chapter in New York, a long time ago. And I just kind of was like, well, what's happening in New York? But when I got there, I found out that Chicago was actually a very, very, I had kind of expected everything to be kind of like the same as it was in Chicago, only bigger, because New York is bigger, But I found a whole other character to the music in New York. And I realized that what I was actually fascinated by was what was happening in Chicago. So after 5 years in New York, I came back to finish my research in Chicago. And what really, captivated me was kind of two things, well, more than just two things. But two, the big things was, I think, people always ask me, since they hear that I did research in New York and research in Chicago, they're like, so what's the big difference between New York and Chicago? Which is like such a, it's a good question. It's just such a huge question. And I don't know.
Yeah.
But, what I like to say, and one of the dimensions that I find to be different is like the music in Chicago felt like very much more participatory. That people were sort of more engaged with the music. The audience was participating in it. Like at any time in the performance, somebody in the audience might get up and go on stage and start you know what I mean? It's like, it was all sort of more community kind of focused and participatory. And the audience is like, encouraging the soloist to play more and play harder. And so that dimension really struck me. And then the other thing was just like kind of the real spiritually oriented core of the music here. And that's in New York, that felt like something people didn't want that. Like I was surprised, like when people started going there, people in New York were like, no. You started like really getting down and playing in some blues terrain and stuff. People were like, no. And I was like, what? but that's what we embrace in Chicago, and that's what kind of flows through everything that happens. Well, not everything.
Yeah.
But so much of the stuff that's happening here is just really embracing those experiences, those feelings, those emotions, and those goals. So that's kind of like where I started to dig into that. But then, like, even like as part of scholarship, people don't want that. They were like, "You can write about spiritual things." So I had to sort of really, really kind of fight to put that in there. It took a while. It took a long ass time to get them to stop giving me trouble. But anyway, that's kind of that's what I wrote my doctorate dissertation about, was the Afrocentric, the sustainability of Afrocentric spiritual jazz in Chicago. What makes it so strong here? After I feel like in the past it was like spiritual jazz kind of happening in different places, but for some reason in Chicago it's like extra strong still, and like what goes into making that, so that's kind of what I was trying to get my head around.
What's the title of your paper?
It's called Sacred Freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, like, see, Adam and I's friendship, for everyone, it goes back. Like, I met Adam musically first, and ironically, the same way Asher. Both of you guys, it was more like we met each other on a musical vibe, like literally, like playing our instruments with our hellos and greetings before I knew about you, anything. And I remember Adam when he was working on this, and I remember. Like, it was going back and forth with your teachers and stuff like that, and then it was almost like the last part of your paper was about forming an actual spiritual jazz ensemble, which was a participatory music coalition, which I think you've included in your work, because it's like you actually studied it, but then you actually started doing it at the same time.
That's brilliant.
Which I feel like Asher, like, you thought I was like the same, like both of you guys have that same thing of like, it's not just research, it's like, it's actually what you guys do.
Yeah. I mean, it's there's so many. I'm so grateful for you bringing us together, Angel, because there's so much we can all talk about. And I know, Adam, obviously you did a whole huge project on this music, and we've probably only scratched the surface in terms of discussions on it. So I'm really excited to get into it a little bit again, But I won't necessarily do an introduction to my work, but I want to respond to something you just said, Angel, which is about both of us being involved in the music, and like not just researching or writing about it. And my album that just came out this year, Dialectic Soul, I had initially wanted to record and submit that as part of my master's dissertation, but I didn't end up being able to do it, just like time and money and everything, trying to get everything together at that stage wasn't possible. But Dialectic Soul was really kind of conceived as part of that project. And I guess the principle of that, I guess, was it felt really important to be involved in this thing that we're writing about and thinking about, and to insist that the thinking can take place, and some of the best thinking does take place by people who are involved in a craft or a practice, and that, my project, if I think about the spaces of thought that I was building on, it was in the car on the way to a gig with musicians, or it was like in the bar after a gig, speaking about the gig and speaking about, oh man, that reminds me of this. Did you know this story about this musician? Actually, he was studying here with this person for a while, or whatever it was, or sitting in my lounge listening to records with my friends. and then, you know, having discussions about the kind of the lyrics of the song, um, and you know, expanding and kind of deconstructing that. So it's like, I guess a big part of my project was to have to kind of acknowledge that so much thought about this music, um, which is really an extension of other cultural and musical and spiritual practices. All of this thought and knowledge exists, like, you know, outside of the academy, and it exists and is held by people who are producing this music, um, rather than necessarily people who have written books. I mean, a lot of people have written a lot of great books on the music, and those are really great resources. I do think there's something else about when people are involved in a practice, and I mean, it's a great privilege, you know, to have the space to reflect on that practice, and so to think about the music as well as be involved in it. But yeah, that was an important thing for me. It was, you know, it was also very much kind of grappling with my own relationship to the music scene, and, you know, in South Africa, a lot of the times the like the jazz music scene is really kind of isolating and kind of like snobbish in a sense, and like, you know, it's really this kind of thing of, if you don't study at music school, it's like really difficult to kind of find your way in the jazz scene, you know. And that's why it's been so amazing to kind of meet you cats and play with all of you, because it's like it's a way of playing and getting into the music that makes so much more sense to me, you know, which is like everyone enters it from where they are, you know, and we can do something together, whether or not you've been playing for a couple weeks or 20, 30 years, you know.
You know, I was thinking, like, you know, like the dynamic that you're talking about, like, of this scholarly, you know, the way that people do jazz, even over here, like the universities teach jazz in a way that they try to separate it from the fact that jazz music isn't just notes on a page. There is a culture, there is a history, there is things that are preserved in that, that are very important. You know, so like this black music, jazz, it's black music, all right? And it was created here in America from black people who were stripped of everything. And so we were stripped of culture, stripped of language, stripped of everything. And some of the only remnants of our past are preserved in this music. So it's crazy to have, like, okay, this jazz music that comes here from Africa to go back to Africa to be what you're talking, like, okay, now it's this elitist, you know, like what happened, you know, that like
Right.
this thing,
Right. Yeah.
now they're trying to take it away even more, which is like,
Right.
meeting you, and you were telling me that, you know, because like sometimes when I tell people what kind of music I do, I'm like, they're not gonna know what I'm talking about, you know. But you were like, oh yeah, you were like, Art Ensemble Chicago, you had the records and everything. I was like, oh, you're deep in this. And then I was asking you, I remember when I first met you, I was like, well, where are the out cats here? I know that there's out jazz music here in Chicago, influenced by that. You're like, oh yeah, there's you know, Hugh Maskela, a whole bunch of people. What's his name? Duduwa. There's a whole bunch of cats. But
Yeah.
You were telling me how like some of them were like exiled. And I was like, why were they exiled? Like, was it because of the music? Was it different, or?
So yeah, I mean, you know, early 60s in South Africa was an intensely repressive time under the apartheid government. So, you know, a lot of activists were killed by the state. A lot of them were incarcerated, and it was a time where the kind of space for both political and cultural activities for Black people got smaller and smaller. So it became more and more difficult you know, to play openly. So a lot of cats, you know, left because there was opportunities to play elsewhere. And, you know, part of that meant, on the one hand, that, you know, cats got to play with people from all over the world, you know, I mean, and a lot of that history is unknown in the States where they played, and in Europe where they played, as well as in South Africa. You know, like South African free musicians played with like Archie Shepp, Cecil Taylor, you know, all of these cats.
Art Ensemble Soweto. I have a poster of them doing.
Yeah, of Art Ensemble of Soweto album. Yeah. But I think, you know, what largely happened in that time between then and sort of now is that the way that people learn the music is different. And a lot of that has to do with the university, but it also has to do with the way that the music's been taken away from, like, kind of the black communities that it emerged in. You know, a lot of people learned the music from, you know, going around to someone's house, and like they had a piano there, so they would stay there for a couple of days and like just check out harmony and learn some tunes, and kind of, you know, they would be playing in different kinds of bands and vocal ensembles. And more of that kind of, you know, the social fabric of black life has been attacked, you know, as it continually is under white supremacy and capitalism. And the institutionalization of those education processes in the university has meant that the music has a different social character, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I see so many of the similar processes happening on the south side of Chicago. And, you know, that's what a lot of the elders keep talking about. You know, the south side of Chicago used to be a city within the city. It used to be almost a self-contained entity. And so you hear all the elders saying, you know, you used to walk down the street. There used to be a black barber and a black person that fixed your shoes, and a black lawyer and a black dentist and a black-owned grocery store. And everything was within the community because it had to be. And, you know, we didn't just learn jazz. We learned jazz and blues and gospel and funk music and reggae because it was all happening. And it wasn't just because we were playing jazz. We had to learn all the different styles because you could get called for any kind of a gig. But the point was, it was all kind of happening all within the community. And that seems to have, that cohesion seems to have really, you know, disintegrated over the last, you know, 4 or 5 decades. To the point where, you know, that's no longer available. And I think you're right. It's really been there's been a brain drain a little bit. You know, it's like cats, they take up residence in the institutions and universities, but that means who has access to that knowledge. It used to be cats, you know, if you want to learn how to play, you go down to the spot where they're playing, right? You go down to the jam session. You go down to the place, which is right over there. It's not on the north side, you know? It's right over there. And, you know, little kids are like trying to peek through the window to see what's going on in there and shit, you know, and trying to sneak in when they're too young. Like, that's not happening now, you know? And so where you have to go is these institutions where there's a barrier, and who controls access to those institutions.
Like, let's be honest, like, honestly, education is run by white people. And I know people have problems with me saying white, but it's just what it is. If you look at the heads of universities, it's usually a white person in charge. Now, the thing that I always say is, like, that's just what it is. So if you're white, you're probably not going to think about black all the time. Just like me, I'm black. I don't really think about the concerns of white people because it's not in my thing. So I'm not even trying to say it's a sinister racism thing. It's that too, but it's more of those things like, if there's no one there to think about it, then I always feel like it's my responsibility to make people think about it. Because I was just reflecting about how when I first started really getting into like the free music and free jazz scene, I would go to all these shows with Adam. And my thing is, I would be loving the music and I would see these great black musicians on stage, and I would look at the audience and I would see no black people in the audience. I would see no women, barely any, never any black women. And I was like, okay, how is everyone sitting around and not feeling like this is a problem? To me, I feel like it was problematic. And I was like, the reason why is because no one's thinking about it. And it's because they don't have to think about it. Why should you think about it? You're getting what you want. You're going there, seeing your favorite artist, and who cares who's in the audience? Well, for me as a Black musician, it's important to know that this is Black music. You know, this music is Black music. Black is beyond just our skin tones. It's an essence. It's our culture and everything. And so Mothership9 is a way to bring that together. That's one thing about Mothership in the ship in space. Why space? Why space is the place? Why is that? Because space can be, that word can be taken so many different ways. You know, it's definitely outer space, but it's also Black space. This is a space where we're actively and intentionally thinking about Black music.